afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I can just tell you that I am indeed blessed and honored to be here today to present to you a keynote speech. Thank you to my sister and colleague at Tidewater Community College, Sister Olive Ezel. We both teach the principles of public speaking. So, as you know, I'm going to really mess this one up. But first of all, I would again like to give thanks, of course, glory and praise to our Father and our God and His Son, Jesus Christ.
Amen.
And next, I would love to thank my dear, precious friends of 50 plus years seated before me. My heart goes out to you, you know, and your families. Then I have another person that I didn't even know was coming, Gwen. Where's Gwen? She's still here from Chrome? Okay, stand up, Gwen. Another dear, beloved sister who has been with us at Chrome, that's cooperating Hampton Roads Organizations for Minorities in Engineering. We are in our 35th year, by the way. And Gwen has been with us all along. It's a program to encourage our students to pursue STEM careers: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And I also would like to honor my relatives that came down all the way from Maryland to see me. My brother Al and his wife Janet. Where are you? You're back there. My daughter Grace is here with Kevin, who also came down from Washington, D.C. And I have extended relatives that belong to St.Cyprian, and that is Mrs. Gail Boyd Jones. Where are you? My relative, there you are over there, and her family. So as you see, I'm very honored. And to the pastor, Reverend Ramsey, and most definitely to Dr. Darden. I had no idea that she would be here because she's actually in my speech. So what a story that is. So let's get started. One of the challenges that I give my students on the first day of every class as they embark upon the unknown vicissitudes of public speaking, which is also the theme of my class, and that is to vindicate your visceral voice and visualize speech as story. So whose story is it, they ask. And I tell each of them, it is your story. And I tell each of you today, as I share with you the stories that we all know about, and then I'll tell you about some of the stories that we don't know about. But what you will begin to see, and what I hope will happen, is that you will focus on your story. Because as we celebrate African American History Month this month, it is also about you. The American poet and political activist Muriel Rukeyser once proclaimed through one of her poems, the universe is made up of stories, not atoms. And that is most certainly what we reflect upon this month, February. 28 days to remember all those stories, and we hear them over and over again. These are the known stories that we've heard a million times, such as that of Booker T. Washington, who walked hundreds of miles all the way to Hampton Institute from his birthplace near Roanoke, about 280 miles away, just to earn a college education. And we've all heard the oft-cited story of George Washington Carver, an agricultural scientist and inventor who was summoned to Tuskegee Institute in Alabama to teach industrial trades to African American students. Carver, enslaved in Missouri, allegedly castrated by his owner at the age of 11, as was usually the custom when an enslaved male worked in the home of his master. But although Carver was a mere boy when he was converted, he viewed his faith in Jesus Christ as a means of destroying both barriers of racial disharmony and social stratification. Believing that he could have faith both in God and science, Carver integrated faith and science into his life, testifying on many occasions that his faith in Jesus was the only mechanism by which he could effectively pursue and perform the art of science. And we all know the story that as the genius of Carver exploded, he invented hundreds of products, including more than 300 from peanuts, such as milk, plastics, paints, dyes, cosmetics, medicinal oils, soap, ink, and 118 from sweet potatoes, such as postage stamp glue, flour, vinegar, and even a type of gasoline. And I do have to just insert, that was some good sweet potato pie right there. So as he traveled the South to promote racial harmony, he continued on to India to discuss nutrition in developing nations with Mahatma Gandhi. And Carver summarized his life story in this following quote: "How far one goes in life depends on you being tender with the young, compassionate with the aged, sympathetic with the striving, and tolerant with the weak and strong. Because someday in your life, you will have been all of them." And as we continue our stories, we cannot dismiss the stories of our African American sisters, such as Harriet Tubman, who led hundreds to freedom by way of the Underground Railroad, by the GPS guidance system of her Almighty God. And while most Americans know that Harriet Tubman was an Underground Railroad conductor, far fewer know that she was also considered an expert naturalist whose love of the natural world included flowers, trees, animals, waterways, wind patterns, forestry, and the stars. Also following the stars were Hampton's own human computers: Dr. Christine Darden, Dr. Catherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, Mary Jackson, and many others who, through the eyes of God, drafted the trajectory to the moon without a smartphone, an iPad, a laptop, or a computer. So man could safely take his first step on the moon that warm summer day in July of 1969. A trip, I might add, that has never been repeated from the United States of America. So those are the stories we know, the stories we've heard over and over again. And those are the good stories, and we do need to reflect on the good stories. However, it is usually the stories that we don't know by people who aren't as famous, that also further authenticate that our universe is made up of stories, not atoms. So today I want to share with you a story of my ancestors by way of a document that was actually found one day quite by happenstance by my brother Alfonso last year on the internet as he was reading excerpts from a book entitled If You Were Only White, The Life of Leroy Satchel Paige, an outstanding American Negro League Baseball and Major League Baseball pitcher, who was also the first African American to pitch in the World Series. However, Paige's story went something like this. He was one of 10 children born to impoverished parents in Mobile, Alabama. And he wrote in his book that his wardrobe ranged from soiled diapers to raggedy shirts that came down to his knees. He, like most children in the South, black and white, went shoeless most of the time. He wrote that he received his first pair of shoes at the age of 9, hand-me-downs from his older siblings, and that these second-hand clothes were of great, quote, personal embarrassment for him, end of quote. He wrote that he never forgot how it hurt when his playmates teased him for looking like a scarecrow in his desperately too short pants and shirts. But Leroy Satchel Paige enjoyed growing at things. As he got older, he became better and better at it. He would literally spend hours each day just growing at things. Eventually, he engaged in rock hunts and began throwing rocks to kill squirrels and rabbits that became great stews for the family. There were countless occasions in the Paige household that the results of Leroy's hunt helped make the meal for that evening. Some days he went out specifically after birds, most readily the sparrows, which became his prized targets. No rifle, BB gun, or slingshot. Just a rock hurled with incredible speed and deadly accuracy was all that he needed to bring down game. Eventually, his capacity to work and to hustle characterized his life. He was clever and innovative when it came to earning money. He went to the local train station and began carrying bags for the passengers. But many of the young boys in the black community knew of the work at the station. They also hustled there too. Sometimes a passenger might have 8 or 10 boys running up and pleading to carry the luggage. Whites were most likely to hire you and give you a nickel or dime for carrying their bags to the train. Elderly blacks were also good bets. Many of them would use your services, but most often could afford to give you only a tip of a few pennies. But Leroy did not discriminate. He discovered an ingenious way of upping his rate of productivity by increasing the number of bags that he could tote at any one time. Acquiring a pole and some rope, he devised a contraption for himself that slung across his shoulders and from which he could hang 3 or 4 bags at a time. When the other boys saw him toting all those satchels, they broke into laughter and poked fun at him, saying things such as, "Boy, you're gonna kill yourself. You're that poor? I'll give you a nickel. And what good is an extra dime if you're dead?" The one-liner, though, that his fellow train station child workers used most came from a good friend of his. And he said, quote, "You look like a walking satchel tree," end of quote. And hence, we got the name Satchel Paige. But Lula Page, Satchel's mother, wanted her children most of all to have a good education. But the school that Satchel attended was just like all other elementary schools for black children anywhere in the Jim Crow South. It subscribed to the principle of providing the students a basic grasp of the 3 R's, which we all know: reading, writing, and arithmetic, and a firm grounding in manual labor, and the big B of proper being. But young Satchel had a natural rebellious streak, or maybe he intuitively rejected the limited brand of education being offered him at the school. He hated going there, and it began to show in his performance in class. But it wasn't that he was unintelligent or uneducable. To the contrary, Satchel could be exceptionally quick in learning things. It's that the goals of the schools with the emphasis on manual work and rote memory exercises, he found exceedingly boring. He became so bored, stopped going to school, and eventually began doing whatever he could to get in trouble with the law, which wasn't too hard for a little black boy in the South at that time. And then he wound up as part of an educational experiment at the Alabama Reform School for juvenile Negro lawbreakers, located in Wall, Alabama, which he said that made him determined from that point on that he wanted to become something more than just another, quote, throwaway colored boy, end of quote. And from that moment on, after his discharge from the reformatory, he started a steady climb to overcome the limitations placed on him in the Jim Crow South. The reason I told you the story about Satchel Paige, because it was in the Satchel Paige's book that my brother was reading. Basically, he was reading the document. He found this book online. But in the book, he talked about a place near his reform school that was called Carter Place. A place my brother had heard many times by my dad as the place that my great-grandfather and his family had once lived. My brother also remembered my dad talking about Satchel Paige. And he remembered that Satchel Paige had been in that very same reform school not far from Carter Place. So as my brother entered the name Carter Place into Google, he found Dallas Hanbury, who is a young archivist at the Montgomery County Archives in Montgomery, who had posted an object lesson suggested for the 10th grade entitled Slavery, Wealth, and the Emancipation Proclamation in Alabama. Carter Place then was the name of a plantation, and its owner was Alexander Carter. This is the first time that we ever knew that our great-grandparents lived on the plantation Carter Place. So the objective of this lesson was for students to use primary source documents to learn that prior to the Civil War, slavery acted as the dominant economic system, represented a way to generate significant personal wealth. Thus, the primary objective was for students to learn that the abolishment of slavery as an outcome of the Emancipation Proclamation resulted also in the economic demise of many Southerners whose wealth depended on owning enslaved people to work their plantations and other businesses. And so is the story of slave owner Alexander Carter. 1 month after the Emancipation Proclamation was made active on January the 1st, 1863, Alexander Carter died on February the 4th or February the 5th, 1863. And on this document, my brother Alfonso saw an accounting of all that Carter owned. My great-grandfather, Peyton's value was $900. Carter's donkey, named Jack, was worth $1,000. Peyton's parents, my great-great-grandparents, Bob and Lucinda's value together was $2,900. Carter's stock of mules was $3,900. The total value of his 70 listed enslaved human beings was $66,000. Now, $66,000 in 1863 would be worth $1,283,964 today. And we found out all of this because of Satchel Paige's book. Yes, this is my story. The point of intersecting Satchel Paige's story with my story shows that most of our stories intersect with someone else's story. And each and every one of you here today, you are a part of my story as well. So sharing it with you today, I am vindicated. And telling your story will vindicate your visceral voice as well. But it is in the telling of your story, my story, that we unite as one. It is in the telling of your story, my story, that it resonates in our being, that in times of crisis, we summon up our strength in our faith, in our God. We are enabled, empowered to call every resource, every forgotten image that can leap to our quickening, every memory that gives credence to our power within. For I know the plans and thoughts that I have for you, says the Lord. Plans for peace and well-being and not for disaster. To give you a future and a hope, says the prophet Jeremiah. I conclude today with a quote, a story, I call it too, that my very first pastor, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., said about himself on August 11, 1957, and I quote, "Help me, O God, to see that I'm just a symbol of a movement. Oh God, help me to see that where I stand today, I stand because others helped me to stand there. And because the forces of history projected me there. And this moment would have come in history even if Martin Luther King Jr. had never been born. So we really, in actuality, are all symbols of this life, telling our collective and personal stories. It is your story, and it is mine as well. E pluribus unum, out of the many one. The 13-letter traditional motto of the United States, which constantly reminds us today of the fact that the United States was established as a cohesive single nation as the result of 13 smaller colonies joining together, of which Virginia was one, a union formed by the separate states. E pluribus unum, out of many one. Out of many ideas, out of many stories, one is given to you. Out of the 8 billion people on the earth, you are the idea that has the story to tell. The month of February, the shortest month, it's not just about my history, it's about yours too. What will you do with the idea that only you have been given? What will you do with your voice, your visceral voice, the one that speaks to you in the depths of your heart, your soul, your God-given beingness? I've told you today the stories of people you've heard about and people you haven't heard about. And so today, I humbly ask you, and you, and you, and you, what's yours?